I've been waiting on tonight.
I'm not too good at this intro thing. Luckily, David's a good friend of mine, and I don't need to float his boat too much here. But long story short, he's one out of two people within a group called Vallis Alps. Within the past couple of years, they went from they basically hit a pretty sweet viral streak, and since then have just been riding this wave. I'm going to read out these stats shamelessly on David's behalf over here. 30 million online streams. They peaked at number one on Hype Machine. They've been featured on Triple J's Hot 100 numerous times. They're on tour right now through. This is kind of like the second tour within the past couple months, or on switch. There you go.
It has an on switch, of course.
Yeah.
We're 25 shows into like a 74 show year.
And how many of those shows have you sold out?
23 of the first 25.
That's impressive. That's impressive. So,
thanks, dudes.
The other thing is, this dude's pretty humble too. So I think if he would not have mentioned any of those statistics, but I guess to back things up a little bit, the crazy thing is, David and I went to school together at one point up in Seattle, or a little bit north of Seattle, in a place called Bellingham. And David was at one of the first music producers club that
The first.
This was 6 or 7 years ago. I mean, we may have had 10 to 15 people there. And it was a similar vibe of us just sharing music, a little bit more intimate, but we were just sharing tips and tricks. The crazy thing is, I remember one day David releasing this album online with a partner of his, who unfortunately, where is Parisa?
Paris is in Australia.
Okay, so that's the other half. And I mean, it from 1 week to the next, the album just took off. Is it right to say that out of nowhere it just completely took off?
We uploaded it to SoundCloud, and then I went to bed, and then something happened overnight. We didn't do anything.
Except for make the music sound really good.
That's all we can do.
So you went to bed and woke up, and how many, what were the numbers coming in?
I think we had, I uploaded it on SoundCloud, put it to public so that I could just wake up the next day and post. Our release plan was literally posted on our Facebooks and then just keep going on with our lives. I uploaded to SoundCloud, and then I woke up, I think it was 300 or 400 emails and maybe 3,500 downloads. We'd maxed out SoundCloud's downloads for the free accounts before I'd woken up. So it's just all this crazy stuff that you read about that kind of happened to us.
Can you make any sense, or is there anything that you did to make it happen, or it just
Genuinely no. Somebody hit me up a few, maybe 2 or 3 months after the EP came out. They're like, "What release advice do you have?" And I uploaded to SoundCloud. I had nothing.
That's what it takes. It's just
we were just really lucky.
Yeah. And then one of my favorite stories that you've told is that conversation that you had with Parisa, where you basically were like, "Hey, let's do this for real. Let's meet up." You moved to Australia within what, a couple of days, weeks after that?
No, it was actually 6 months after we put it out, because basically, Paris is in law school. So Paris is the singer. She's in law school right now in Australia, and she has been through the last 2 years that I've been living there. And we put out the EP, went viral, and then we were sort of okay, at some point this is going to drop off, and because a lot of people go viral and then kind of just die off. But it was 4 or 5 months of just crazy stuff happening every single day. And about 3 months into that, we were okay, if we were to do this, how do we do it? At which point it made sense for me to move to Australia. And we were kind of working with the person who became our manager. She was telling us what a label was and what management was, and where all these emails were coming from, because we literally knew nothing. And then 6 months after the EP came out, we booked our first run of shows, and then that was the reason why I moved to Australia in June of 2015.
And just been cruising since. You just put out another EP, right?
Yeah. I think actually a month ago. A month and 3 days ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. So the other part that I'm really fascinated by is that you guys are, I would say, a pretty well-known name in Australia, and now are starting to like build that momentum up in the States. But I think one major part of that was a radio station called Triple J. Does anyone here know of Triple J? It's an Australian radio
There
station.
we go. Are you guys Australian?
I am.
Oh, okay, cool. Tight.
Talk about like the radio culture and what it means to have a radio station like Triple J, and how they kind of helped you build that fan base over there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Australia is a lot smaller than the States. So there's like 25 million people there, and I think it's less than there are people in California. So it's a really small place. But there's a radio station there called Triple J, which is like publicly funded, and because of that, they can take all these risks by putting on artists really early or really experimental stuff, and they don't run commercials and stuff. So for us, we uploaded to this like social network for unknown Australian acts called Triple J on Earth. And the reason why we could is because the singer was Australian. I'm not Australian. But they picked it up from that website and then started playing it on the station. And I think I don't know if it's the biggest station in Australia, but there's a ton of people listening to it, and it's a huge like driver of culture in Australia. So they just played us super early on and have really supported us ever since. So we're just super lucky.
And what was it like? What was it like, kind of adjusting to that area, that genre, or like that vibe of having a radio station that was able to like also help to boost you guys, and then kind of having that fan base over there, an area that you kind of weren't that familiar with?
Yeah, I'd never been to Australia before I moved there. Like Triple J has such a big reach that by the time I moved to Australia, people knew who we were, and they were listening to us, and they were waiting for us to announce shows. So everything it was just really easy on that front, transitioning people from listening to the radio to coming to shows. There aren't really any other direct comparisons I can make in the States. It would be as if NPR had like a super tight music division that everybody under 30 listened to and really cared about. And like they were involved in every festival. Like there's just no comparison to the States. But it was crazy. Like from our first shows, the first time we'd ever performed was 5 weeks after I got to Australia, and people were already like singing along to our stuff. And it was pretty bizarre, given that we worked on it in a bedroom for a year and a half.
That's kind of the other thing is like, it seems that the way that you guys engage with your fans and the way that fans show their support, it's just a lot more like personable and close than a lot of other groups that I've seen. You do a lot of stuff to like go out of your way to engage with your fans. You have a blog that you're doing, and where you guys like make a post, people respond to these posts way more and like are actually engaging in conversation with you. What does it mean to have that type of engagement? Why do you think that's an important part of the brand of Vallis Alps, but more importantly, that interaction that you have with your fans?
Oh man. It is hugely important because like the numbers that you see online are human people listening to your stuff. We I don't know, I guess Paris and I sort of just stumbled into this as our job, I guess, now. So we've done things like that are like a little bit less conventional, but just kind of made sense for us. Like we put out all of our stems, and we'll probably do that for this EP too. I don't know when, but put out our stems. Eventually, I want to start just putting out project files when songs are done. Like somebody was mentioning, I think it was you. You presented first how like you would watch YouTube videos and stuff like that, and like that's just cool people online sharing things that they know. So we're trying to do the same thing with what we do, because there aren't really any, like there's not a huge documented like library of sources to consult for music producers. Like you kind of just have to figure things out yourself, which is why spaces like this are so tight. And coming back to also what Rob was saying earlier, I think the first one I came to was like 7 people in a university town in Seattle. So shout out to Rob for building this up, and shout out to you guys for supporting. It's amazing.
Appreciate it. This is not a question, but like last month when you had toured through New York, there's a point where we were at dinner and you had brought up an Instagram picture of a dude that had your guys' lyrics tattooed somewhere on his body, which was the fucking craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I think I was just at a point where I was like really speechless and didn't say anything, and you guys were kind of like chuckling about it.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think that was the fourth tattoo we've seen. I don't know. Somebody was asking me about that recently, and I don't, it's just crazy. I don't really think about it. Like, that's his connection to the song, so that's between him and the music. It's if I try to think about it, it's nuts.
It is nuts.
Yeah.
But I actually got a picture of you guys' faces on my back. So
cool, tight.
So it's not that crazy after all.
It's not weird.
Just to back up a little bit, you guys, you release the stems of your tracks, which is something that's like a little bit foreign, but seems to be like a more emerging trend to release that type of content and not really like hold back, not think about what if somebody uses it in the wrong way. Like, what's your motivation behind putting out more than just a digital release?
I guess it was like, Paris and I had a conversation maybe like 8 or 9 months after our EP came out and all that crazy stuff was happening. And there were a few things. The first thing was, we came into this completely as amateurs. So I don't have any background. I mean, I played in punk bands and stuff in high school, but I don't have any background doing music professionally. I wasn't really planning on doing it professionally. Paris wasn't either. Everything in the music was us. Like, we mixed everything, we wrote everything. But that was after like a really long time, like a year and a half on 4 songs is like way too long. And it was just a matter of like looking for every single online resource we could possibly find and talking to people about mixing and how you get a vocal to stand out in the mix, like we were talking about earlier. And so by the time we finished it, it was like we were trying to think of a way of also contributing to that in some way, because we benefited from it. And the only way I knew how was through the stems. Like, I think had we put out the project file, I had so many random plugins that nobody would have been able to really run it. But so it was a combination of like wanting to pay that forward, but also there were like hundreds of people remixing, like bootleg remixing, which is when you take the whole song and just like chop it up and then remix based on that. A bunch of people doing that anyway, so we figured we might as well just give them the actual tools so that their remixes could be better. And I don't know if they can learn something from what we did, then cool, and if not, then cool. But it kind of just, and also I think, this is kind of like a long-winded answer, but I also think that there's like quite a bit of unnecessary sort of, I don't know if it's ego-driven, but like there's sort of a defensiveness around your workflow techniques, and that's...
Do you not have that? Do you not like hold that very personal?
No, because I'm always dying to know how people do things, and nobody talks about it. Which is, like, again, that's why places like this are so cool. Yeah, I saw some poetry snaps. Anything we can do to like clear that sort of old way of thinking.
Have you, can you speak of like the results of doing that? Is there anything that you could say that's really compelling to motivate people to put out STEM content or something more than just a regular release?
Yeah, well, for us, we had a ton of people remixing it, so that was really cool. Because it's just, like, it's crazy enough that people listen to it, but when other musicians who are as experienced as we are mess with what we do, there's always these crazy interpretations of it that are so much cooler than what we initially thought the potential of the song was.
Do you think it's helped bring more attention to the group in any way? Or I guess like my question is, it seems like we're still going through that phase of like having people be comfortable with releasing that type of content, but it seems like you're making a pretty good case that it is actually a really helpful thing. Aside from like just allowing people to remix, do you think, what are the other benefits that you've seen, maybe in terms of just like having remixes out there? Do you think that kind of helps bring more attention to the original track?
I think so. Like, there are a few of them that got a lot of attention. Like, there's some that have like 500,000 plays on SoundCloud, and we haven't formally released anything, so none of it's on, like, we haven't formally released any remixes, so none of them are on Spotify, but it's, like, a lot of them on their own have been picked up by blogs or by things like, not Majestic, but Mr. Suicide Sheep, which is like a huge YouTube channel, and a bunch of other like equally sized channels have picked up those remixes on their own. Which, side note, like the legal side of that was kind of a headache because we had to like draw up the terms and conditions of what people could and couldn't do with the remixes, given that it's not our content because they're making it, but we have a say in the rights of how it's used and how it's sold. So that was the whole thing. But I think generally it's brought some attention to us, but for the most part, I think the people who benefited from it were people who already knew who we were.
And have you guys ever released music through a record label?
No.
So you've done all of this from start to finish as independent artists?
Yep.
Yeah, let's give it up. Now, was that by choice or by the fact that you guys, like you said, were just kind of thrown into this and just kind of kept going with the motion?
It's kind of both. So basically, when we put out the EP, like every label, like literally every label hit us up. So we have like these huge major labels hitting us up. And this is in like 2015 when I'm still like learning what a booking agent is or how to pay people. Like we literally didn't know anything. And yet we had all these like huge names hitting us up, and I think part of the reason we didn't end up going with any of them is because we had this huge advantage of already having an audience. Like we'd gone viral, so there's people listening, there's demand. We had all this money coming in from Spotify and iTunes before I moved to Australia. So like by the time I moved, we kind of had this little nest egg of money that we could live off of and that we could get gear with and start touring with and stuff. And people were listening to us and paying attention to us anyway. And so it was basically like rolling everything back and being like, okay, what do we want to do with this? What do we actually need? And how much of that do we have to outsource? And the actual amount we had to outsource was basically zero because we had a manager whose background was in PR. So she gets perception, she gets how to like push out music. Parisa is studying to be a lawyer, so she has contract literacy, which is, I don't have that. Like, I can't pay attention to words on a page. And I'm really super into graphic design and video and music, and so pretty much all the creative stuff we could do ourselves. The legal stuff we could handle ourselves. The management and PR we could do ourselves. And so we still took meetings and took calls with labels, but I think it was a combination of not really needing most of their services, not really being swayed by the finances and like the breakdown of ownership. Also, I think part of it is that we're from Seattle, and like everybody in Seattle is independent. There's no major, like there's no smaller labels. It's like if you want to do something, you do it yourself, or it doesn't happen. So all of us kind of just got used to. There's never any assumption that we had help, and I think. Yeah, and also, I mean, I won't get too into this, but I feel like there's a lot that people can do themselves that they themselves prevent themselves from exploring, like things like the creative, the graphic design, the mixing, it's hard, it's not easy, but like if you're excited and you like creating things anyway, there's so much you can do yourself, and the business side is actually a lot easier than most people would tell you.
Do you think it took that foundation of having the viral success and then having all these followers, having like a bit of money come in that like really helped you as an independent artist? And if so, like what would you recommend to those who want to become independent but might not have that foundation? Like what would you say the first step might be?
Yeah, again, we had a huge advantage starting off. So like I could sit up here and be like, F labels. But if you need money, that's a different story. Like it's a legitimate concern. So I think like I don't know if I have much advice because I kind of think like everybody's path is like you just got to figure it out yourself. But I think the attention a lot of people would put into like hustling their music and like getting a lot of ears on it, we sort of ignored all of that and put all of our energy into the quality of our music. And if you have a good product, there's people out there to listen to it. People will find it. And I think Paris and I are both like we have like a high standard of excellence that we want to strive towards, as well as like just we're really passionate about what we do, and we're really frank about creatively what we want to do. And I think if you can mix those, then the quality of your music, you'll always be pushing for something higher than what you did last time. And so I think, I don't have any advice, but what works so far for us was just like focusing relentlessly on the quality of our music and the graphics and the like, just really doing things at the absolute highest level we could do. And that, I think, is part of the reason why it did well when it came out. Part of it wasn't a lot of it wasn't us, but the part that we did really well, I think.
Definitely, when it comes to the stems and your guys' like rise and being an independent artist, there's so much we could go on for ages about, but I do want to get to the music real quick. We have one of your tracks from your last, was it from your last EP?
Yeah, this most recent EP.
Okay, and so why don't we take a listen maybe to a little bit of the track, and then we can dig through some of the stems or different techniques you used.
Sure.
Do you want to tell us a bit about the track?
I'll say a little bit. It's called East. It's the hardest thing I've ever worked on, period. I've never had a musical thing, an assignment, like nothing. I worked on it for a year and a half. Paris and I worked on it for a year and a half. There's also a point where between you and I and 60 people in the room, we had a tour routed last year that we had to cancel because the song wasn't ready. And so it took us like another 8 months to finish it. Sat down with the producer in LA, some like big shot dude, and that was really bad. Didn't work at all. And the only thing I'll say about the song musically is like there's sort of 3 parts of the song, that 3 like separate songs that we just sort of cranked together. So it's like, yeah. Anyway, I'll play a bit of it.
I've been waiting on tonight. Crystallize, crystallize. I've been looking in your eyes. We're on the rise, on the rising from the east again. Oh, my mind is woke, but my heart had never slept. And truth be told, I'm ready for the sky to light with the alpine blue. Saw it in a fading dream. The world we knew was obsolete. Never thought our time would come to end. Suddenly
Damn, this is scary having people listen to your music. Like, shout out to everybody who came up here earlier, because this is terrifying.
Different to when you're performing it on stage with other people listening.
Yeah, it's very different.
Well, what's like a piece of it you want to share with us? Something that you think other people enjoy learning?
So a few reasons I picked this song. There's a few things I think we did really well, and there's a lot of things I think we did really badly. And so I think kind of digging into some of those. I don't know if I should say badly, but we sort of did everything the opposite of what I would professionally recommend to somebody. I guess so I'll get into some like the creative nitty-gritty later, but basically the song started off with that sort of drop thing, which is kind of like this off-kilter, it kind of started off with this weird dance hall thing I was trying to do, and then that became like a banger, #banger. But basically, by every account, like if you look at the project file, if you listen to the song, it's really produced. Like there's like almost 200 tracks in the song. Like these are all folders of like hella stuff in them. I think there's like 35 auxiliary tracks. There's like parallel everything happening. There's auxiliary tracks are like effects sends that you can send to things. There was a point where this project file was just like crashing my computer. And so when I sat down with this like producer in LA, it was like this, like he was disgusted with this project file, and he actually wouldn't work on it until I stemmed everything out according to how he wanted it stemmed. So he wanted like less than 15 stems, which out of a 100 and what, like 170 plus 30 something auxiliary track song is like a lot of fat to trim. And so I think a takeaway from that was even though it's a really bad project file, I could read it and I could get around it, and that's really all that mattered. And I didn't realize that at the time because I was like feeling all dejected because some hotshot told me that it sucked. So it worked for me, but I think a lot of like the year and a half I worked on this, it felt like a file management exercise more than a song. And so if there's one thing, like I'm not one for like giving advice, but if there's one bit of advice I have, like let yourself go crazy in your project files, like produce because it's fun, produce because it's cool, and you can try all these crazy things, but like know when to start cutting things and be really frank with like what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep. And making those decisions is by far the hardest thing for this song, for any song that I struggle with, which is why producers can be really helpful if you click with them, and if you don't, it's terrible. But
let's do one of these things right now. That's some awesome advice. Nice.
But I was just gonna say also, it's like rooms like this are really helpful in that sense, because having to show people what you do, especially when it's something as singular as music production, which you just really just do by yourself, is really helpful, because you don't realize the things you're doing that are unhealthy until you show them to people. And a lot of time before they even point it out, you realize it yourself. Anyway, so I can kind of dig into this a bit. I know the text is a bit small on the screen, but so basically those three chunks of the song I was talking about, you can kind of tell so that's one thing, and then you have the verses that are sort of like
I'm ready for the sky to light with the open.
this totally other thing, and then there's the build-ups, I think. Oops. Yeah, these bits. So that's kind of, those were like the three worlds I was trying to cram together for this song. And I think things that I did on this song that were new was I really made an effort to make vocals an instrument. Not just in the singing, but actually like sampling and resampling vocals. There's a drum sampler called Battery that's made by Native Instruments. That's amazing, that I use for everything. But I would do things like take Paris's voice, do all this crazy like weird tuning with it, and then load it into a Battery instance like it was a drum, and then play the different keys and stuff. And that's how I built things like, let's see, like this, which is kind of the basis of the song.
thought our time
Actually,
would come.
it's fine. So this bit is the thing that's happening in like the drop. But all that is vocals, and that kind of became like a horn. And then this bit up here, which is running during the verses. Sorry, it's a bit quiet. That was kind of like this weird, like bouncing organ thing. So there's a lot that I discovered I could do with vocals that was sort of unconventional, and that could take the song from feeling really computery to feeling really analog and like human made. And that's something that we are always trying to do with our music, and that it's really hard to do with electronic music, is like get it to sound like it was made by people.
And this is something you figured out how to do specifically with the vocals? Or like within all your music, there are like certain techniques you use to give more of a human feel?
Yeah, there's a few like plugins that I find really helpful. Like I try to use a few like analog emulator plugins. So it's like these old compressors and stuff that they just turn into computers.
Can we dig through something that like you feel like you gave a really nice lifelike feel to it?
Okay, sure. So here. I don't know how much you can tell on these speakers, but when you listen in headphones, this is like really thick, like synths. And they're panning really hard left, really hard right, and sort of everywhere.
Can you tell us like a little bit about what we're looking at? Just in terms of like some of the instruments? Or...
Sure, So this is one thing. This was just a bunch of strings that I sort of played this slightly detuned chord with. And then I ran the whole thing through this crazy reverb, really long reverb, and then recorded that reverb, which is why it's like, that's sort of the unprocessed sound. And then I added distortion and then this thing called auto filter, which adds that sort of shaking element. You can kind of, I don't know if you can really tell. Kind of sounds like it's sort of like these MIDI tracks. So these were MIDI tracks, and then what I did was I played them in MIDI, then converted them to audio. So like I re-recorded them, and then once I had that audio, there was a lot more digging in I could do, and also like MIDI. You know how MIDI does that thing? This is like the one room that would get this. This is great.
You know how MIDI does that thing? Like yeah, dude, we all get it.
You know how like MIDI does that thing where if you start in the middle of the note, it doesn't play the note. Drives me crazy. So I try to like bounce out as much as I can.
Bunch of nerds in this room.
I know.
All a bunch of fucking nerds.
Nerds. And we're right amongst you guys.
Yeah, we get it.
This is Nerd Central. This is a nerd support group. I try to bounce out as many things as I can so that once I have an audio, they're printed. Partially because they're easy to work with. Also, because I know my biggest weakness is just committing to ideas and putting aside the fact that sure, maybe it can be 1% better if I spend 17 years tweaking one thing. So once you print that out, it's like all this stress off your brain, and it's all the stress off your computer, and it's also like by the time you get ready to stem things, like the more you have printed into audio, the better, the easier things are.
Do you get rid of the original like MIDI stuff just to like keep moving forward?
I try to, but you can even see, like this is the final project file, and there's still, like I bounced the mix from this, and there's still things I have muted.
Real quick, does everyone understand what it means to, is it called freezing a track or like bouncing? Yeah, does everyone understand what that's talking about? Do you want to quickly just 2 sentences?
Yeah, sure. So bouncing is like the final process of exporting a song. So this is like this monstrosity file that's comprised of like 200-something tracks, and by bouncing it, I'm taking all of that and I'm printing it into one single track, and then that's what you give to a mastering engineer. That's what a mastering engineer sends back. That's what you eventually release. And then freezing tracks is a process by which you can actually go to any one of these tracks. I use a software called Logic, but you can do this in a lot of different workstations. You can hit this little button, and then it'll take a MIDI track and then record all those instruments that are playing, and then every time you play it back, it's going to be playing as audio, even though it's showing you MIDI. So if you make changes, it won't do anything until you unfreeze it and then have it reprinted.
It's called freeze and flatten.
Yeah. So he said in Ableton it's called freeze and flatten. Yeah. I don't know Ableton at all, but we have to perform in it, so it's like this terrifying other world to me.
You're gonna love it.
Why don't we open up the floor to questions over here? We've got a few minutes left, so we'll take four questions. Start right here.
Question on PR. I don't want to say how much money you spend. How important is it, and how do you quantify that?
How important is PR, and how do you quantify it?
We actually, for the first year and a half, we didn't spend anything on PR. I think generally, a lot of this is just kind of my own theories. So basically take everything I say today with a grain of salt, because you guys know you better than I know you. But I think most blogs that sort of tout themselves as being big blogs don't really have as much engagement as they think they do. I think, like, for instance, if like Vogue posts about the weekend, people are going to flock to it. But if Vogue posts about us, it's the same platform, nobody's going to care. So we were like really sort of focused more on like what are the right places to be seen on the internet, as opposed to like paying somebody to just flood, or paying, God forbid, paying a blog to, we generally wouldn't pay, but like there's all these exclusive things you can do where like if Noisy or something, by the way, Vogue and Noisy are tight, we're in New York right now, so I've got to be really careful. But like if somebody, like a lot of the time people will do things like they'll give a blog exclusive first release. And sometimes that works. We've never really done that because it hasn't worked for any of our friends. So we've always tried to just put our music in the right place. And since our manager handles our PR, we just got really lucky on that front because she really knows the landscape in Australia. And for places like the US and the UK, we only started paying for PR recently. And so we're still waiting to like be able to look back and see how that went.
Good question. Let's go back corner over there.
He was basically saying something along the lines of like when you compare the music in your project file to something you hear on the radio or on Spotify, there's like a gulf of between the quality of your music and the quality of the final released master music. And he was asking at what point did I feel like I bridged that / how? Yeah. I don't feel like I've come close to that. I think I'm an okay mix engineer. We do everything ourselves, like the mixing, except for mastering. I'm an okay mix engineer, but there's corners that I cut on this EP with vocal processing especially. Vocals are generally where you can hear if somebody's a great mix engineer or not, because everything else you can kind of get by on. There's still things that I feel like I could go back and fix, go back and change. And I think the focus by the end was more like, I just want to see if I can finish it, because it had been a year and a half and I was hating making music. It happens to everybody. Like for instance, like I can sit up here and show you a finished EP and it sounds good, but like we went through 4 mastering engineers to find the person who eventually did it. Like he actually, he unfortunately passed away a month ago, but yeah, like in between all of those mastering engineers, we would send it off to somebody, get it back, wouldn't be good, have them do 3 revisions, and then switch mastering engineers, which is like really hard to do because you only have one set of ears, and your ears are very easily tricked, like very easy. You go on a walk and you come back 5 minutes later, and your song sounds completely different. So I think like on the surface, it looks like I finished something and confidently submitted it to mastering. But we did a remix last year that I'm super proud of now, that when I sent it off, I felt sick. Because I felt like there's all these things that we could have done that I just didn't do. But I think that generally, if my goal is to bridge that gap as much as possible from a technical perspective. I feel like creatively I do the things that excite me, but technically there's some degree of rights and wrongs. Not entirely, but if you want to do something, there's ways of doing it. And I want to get better at mixing, because I think there's a lot of good mastering engineers, and mastering, if you know what you're doing, can be done really quickly. Like we sent our EP to this mastering engineer, and he had it back in less than a day. Whereas mixing can take like a month. There's that, like the famous example is when Kanye had Stronger mixed 11 times. I probably did like, I don't know, I can't even count mixes because producing is also kind of mixing. You mix as you go. And so the mix sessions I would go to, I would just find some nice studio with a pair of NS10s, the Yamaha really bad monitors are the best for mixing, and then the Genelec 8020Bs or something. And as long as they had those, I could care less about the room. And I would pretty much just listen to the song, make a few adjustments, go outside, come back, listen to the song, make a few adjustments, and then by the end of the day, you have a mix. Whereas if I was mixing from scratch, like a rock band, it would take weeks and weeks, but you kind of just do it as you go. Anyway, it's a really long-winded answer, but basically, the what is that I never feel like I'm at that point where it's anywhere comparable to what I listen to on Spotify or the radio. But the how, I think, is just, as producers, the one thing you really have to learn, I'm saying this for myself especially, is mixing. Because if you can mix, like, the tone of your song is your song. It's not like a band where you show up and the instruments you play, and like part of your craft is like custom building your sound. So if you can mix, it's so much easier to get the thing that you want to hear. And if you can just learn the thing that other people do across every discipline, like the more of those you can do yourself, the better, I think.
Let's take one more question in the back over there.
Yeah, so the question was, essentially, there's like 200 tracks here. He was asking about workflow and how you keep track of all this stuff and how you sort of build things out from an initial idea, I think. Does that kind of sound, okay, cool. Well, everything starts off small and then becomes bloated and then gets reduced and then is done, for me. So this is reduced, which is really bad. Like, even playing this bit earlier, this is like, that's basically like, what, 10 tracks to make one sound. Yeah, it's like, and even that's part of the reason why mixing was such a headache for this, is because there's just too many things doing the same thing. And so, I guess in terms of my workflow, generally, I'm really easily distracted, and I kind of just do whatever I want. And so if I have something to get done, it's really hard to like pull away from the thing I'm excited about and work on that. So the way this got started was that like dance hall type thing that I was doing. And then it kind of just got bigger as I found more things I was excited about. And that's why when I sat down with this producer, he was like, we basically took the whole song, gutted it, and then he was rewriting the song. And I kind of just figured out he just wanted to do his own thing. So I let him, and then I just did whatever I wanted after that, because I had the original project file, so I could do what I want. Or so. Anyway, workflows basically start off with an initial idea, and then pretty much everything in this track has been replaced. So I had like some really ugly drums in the beginning, and I would find things that I like, and then I'm okay, cool, I'm done with this bass drum, and now I have the one I like. And as soon as you switch that, it's like, okay, wait, now that that's done, the bass doesn't work anymore. And then as soon as you switch the bass, okay, none of this works, the bass is perfect, everything else has to be rebuilt. So it's like this continual process of like bumping my head. You guys ever play Age of Empires? You know when like you're in the beginning of the game and you're like the character in the map and the map is black and you have to just walk around and slowly starts lighting up the map as the character explores? It's a really weird analogy, but that's kind of what this is like. It's like you start off with something that's really cool and then you're just in this abyss of like trying to build the rest of it around it. Because I'm really not one of those people who starts off with like some crazy built out vision of a song. I have to experiment, I have to make mistakes, I have to, like our first EP, we have a song called Young that I went through 14 different completed copies of, and they're all completely different, which isn't good, like mentally, but I really don't have a workflow that I would say is like super efficient or great, but I think the music that we make calls for a level of excellence that the other stuff that I make, which is like this weird trap, like super unquantized, like that stuff I can pump out in a day, but this stuff I just have to keep, yeah, anyway. But I think doing little things like color coding tracks and deleting things that are muted that you're not absolutely going to use. And Logic also has this function. How many people in here use Logic? Oh, tight. I don't know any other Logic users. Like, everybody uses Ableton in Sydney. This is great. But it has this function called Save Alternatives, like New Alternative. And basically you can take all the assets of whatever version you're working on and save a copy of it where it doesn't delete, or it doesn't duplicate everything on the back end. So my old project files used to be like 19 or 20 gigs a piece for a 3-minute song. Like, it's ridiculous. And it's because Logic just stockpiles every single audio sample you ever use. Whereas with alternatives, it'll reuse those samples in different copies of the thing. So in fact, that's what I did today. That's why I have this version, which is the MPC one, where I made a mirror of my previous mix. So if I deleted everything now, it would still be there. And the advantage of that is that, again, really long-winded response, sorry, is that I can go in and experiment with things and know that my previous ideas are still saved, and then I can import like MIDI tracks from 3 versions ago, and it'll work. So like just learning the environment better has been really helpful, because my modus operandi is to completely ignore whatever I'm supposed to be doing and just do whatever I'm used to, which isn't that good. Like, and I think part of that is because if you don't talk to anybody who uses the software as well, you're not going to get any sharper. You're just going to keep doing the same things that are really inefficient. Which, again, thank you, Rob, for like opening up spaces like this. This is tight.
On that note, let's give it up for David. Cool. Yeah, thanks a lot. We'll have a recap, and you can find David, or you can find Vallis Alps on SoundCloud, all this stuff. We'll send out an email to everyone, just like recapping David's music, a little bit about the next meeting. There's a Facebook page that you guys should join if you haven't already, to stay tuned in with everything. The next meeting will happen sometime in June at the Spotify headquarters. That's a promise. That's a promise. Somewhere in Manhattan. It's a nice space. They do like live streaming, all that. Very professional. But honestly, guys, this has been really cool. Thank you so much for coming out, and stay tuned for next month's meeting.